Pets Who Thrive Radio with Tammy King.
Hello, I am so glad everyone is here joining me today. You are in for such a treat. I have an amazing guest on today's show, Amanda Ree with Sama Dog. Amanda is such a trailblazing force in canine wellness and a compassionate animal chaplain driven by a soulful connection with animals' emotional and spiritual lives. With certifications and an extensive experience teaching Ayurveda, meditation, and yoga since 2001, she's mentored under the esteemed Dr. Deepak Chopra for 15 years. Amanda's transformative teachings foster harmonious bonds between humans and their beloved animal companions, promoting a healthier, balanced, and spiritual lifestyle. Amanda, I am so glad you're here joining me today. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Tammy. I am super happy to be here. I'm really happy to connect to you and your audience. It's great to expand and touch even more lives.
Absolutely. What I would love is if maybe you could tell us a little bit about your story, how you started and how you were led to the Ayurveda.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think all of our stories kind of it's like the story leads us, as much as we get to lead that story and make those choices. So it's kind of interesting reflecting back. When I was 3 years old, it does begin that far ago. When I was 3 years old, we were living in Southern California and I slipped into the pool and our family dog saved my life.
Wow.
So I do think that just sealed the deal for a very deep, soulful connection forever with canines and me and just the friendship and love that we shared. And so as I got older, lots and lots of animals around, finally convinced my parents to buy a pet store. I grew up in Lake Tahoe, and
Nice.
My parents owned the one and only pet store in Tahoe for 15 years. And I went there every day and got to learn so much and experience and just connect and continue to walk down that journey and build this love. And then fast forward years, after college, I then eventually made my way into the spiritual studies, to the yogic studies, yoga, meditation, and Ayurveda. They say those are kind of like the three legs of the stool. Some of our listeners might not know what Ayurveda is. Most people are familiar with yoga and meditation, but there is this third sister science, and all rooted in India. And I fell in love, as many of us do, first with the asana, the physical practice. Felt good, loved to stretch, got deep, got some muscles, all the things that you kind of get started in. And then I just ended up falling in love with those practices. They really transformed my life. I knew at a very deep level that this was my journey. And this was now almost 30 years ago, I think. And so coming back to my regular life at that time, really diving deeper into this, I made a connection and started my work with Dr. Deepak Chopra, as you mentioned, with the Chopra Center. And I served at the Chopra Center for over 15 years and eventually was the vice president of the Chopra Center, certified in all of their teacher trainings, hosted all the events that we traveled around the world with, and got to know so many fabulous people and just deepen my knowledge so much. And meanwhile, still kind of almost like my hobby was my deep love and devotion to animals and all the work that I was doing there with fostering and helping with rescue. So then eventually those two worlds came together. People started asking me questions, in the Chopra landscape of oh, I know you really like animals. What do you think about this and this? Does this apply to my animals? That question started to come up. And not just Ayurveda, the Ayurveda, so that our listeners know, it's the science of life, or the science of nature. It's like lifestyle science, and it combines body, mind, and spirit all together into this formulation for how we live our lives and how we thrive. And so there were a lot of ways that framework fit into the lives of animals, because they too are, alive just like we are. They are built of the same stuff that we are. They have a communal experience, emergence, a connection with their environment, just like we do. And so I started to look into it, if it was out there in the world already. And lo and behold, it wasn't. No one was really teaching Ayurveda for animals. And now there are a few more. This was about 10, 12 years ago now that I started Sama Dog and started to bring these teachings together and started to bring my worlds together. And there are so many people out there that actually really enjoy learning about this or open themselves up to a whole new world because they are devoted to their dog and they want the best for their animal and realize this all applies to them too. And together they get to heal. So it's super rewarding. I absolutely love it. I have my own personal stories of how my life and my animals have been changed. And it continues to surprise me every day how powerful this work can be.
Yeah. I have to say, one thing that if anybody wants to learn more about Amanda and her teachings, she has an amazing website and lesson. I went through her course and I learned so much. It opens your eyes to such a world and understanding that our animals, their emotional and mind and body, all of that is so important to their health. And I was wondering if maybe you could share one of the stories that I connected with was when you talked about Maya. And how her health was and what that looked like for you.
Yeah, she really is the one who first got me to realize this connection and realize the power of these teachings. Yeah, and the Ayurveda for Dogs 101 course, that's what you're referring to, is just such a nice, because people don't, who knows what Ayurveda is? Like a lot of people don't. And that's fine. You really don't need to. It's just a word, right? It's a 2,000 plus year old tradition. So it's very classical, tried and true, yet it is not in our Western vocabulary. And again, it's not important. The principles are what are important. And yeah, I think it's so important to bring the spotlight to the fact that I think we can use ourselves as an example right off the bat is when we know, like if we're exercising, sleeping well, drinking enough water, getting some sunlight, having good relationships, if we still are not feeling good on the inside, if we're dealing with depression or anxiety, or we're going through grief, or we're just stressed out by the world around us, which is very easy to do, we know in ourselves we actually can't be truly healthy. We can do all the steps, we can make all the commitments to our routines, but inside of us, we don't feel really healthy and most importantly, balanced. And that's what Sama means, by the way, Sama dog. Sama is Sanskrit, the ancient language, meaning equanimity, a balance of body, mind, and spirit, and heart and soul, a balance of the outside world and the inside world. And we could put a bunch of words to that, but all of us know what that feels like. All of us know when we're just like, someone says, how are you? And we're like, I'm in a really good place. That's what we mean. And so I highlight that because our animals are the exact same. We can be feeding them well. We can be getting all the right supplements in their bodies. We can be exercising them well. But if their environment, and most importantly, our energy is their environment, is affecting them in a certain way, it's hard for them to get past that with some good food and proper lifestyle. So for all of us, our animals included, bringing in the whole picture is really important. For Maya, that's, that's kind of starting at the end of what she taught me, because I didn't really think about it that way with animals. I knew and saw and felt how intuitive they were and how connected, but I didn't understand how porous, how spongy, how affected they were by our space and our mindset. So yeah, this was years ago, Maya, a cockapoo in our life. She just went into this very unwell cycle, as many of our dogs do, and many of us can probably relate to. I couldn't figure it out. She just stopped eating. She got really skinny. She was very, very agitated and irritated and antsy and nervous. She was always nibbling on her feet. She had plucked all the hair off her whole belly. Whole thing was bald. Constantly chewing, very restless, wouldn't sleep through the night. Even when she would chew on herself and her belly or on her paws or something, you would hear this little whine. It is like subtle little whine. She was always like almost whining, almost all the time. She just became extremely ungrounded. And quite frankly, and now looking back, sometimes I feel bad about this, but I share this because I think it's a similar story for so many of us, is I got mad at her. I was irritated. I was just like, what's wrong with you? Like, I've got enough going on in my life right now. I don't need you to be making things worse, and I feel terrible just saying that. But that is how I felt at the time. And I was just like, I couldn't even be around her. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't barely be in the same room. Like, it was very challenging. And we were going to the vet over and over, spending thousands of dollars. We couldn't get any resolve. So finally, I came to a point in my own life where I realized that I was not balanced. I was not in sama. And I said, I have all the tools. I just need to apply them, and I need to do that for myself. And today's the day. Like, I must make this change. And it's almost like through that conversation with myself, Maya appeared there next to me with a very strong reminder of her existence and her reflection of what was going on with me. And it was like a light bulb went off. I was just like, you are acting how I feel on the inside. Nervous, agitated, restless, discontent with everything. So at that moment was life-changing for me and for Maya, because it really paved the path for this journey that I've been on. And it was her saving grace, because from that moment on, I decided that whatever I'm going to do, whether it's meditation, whether it's more hydration in my food, whether it's a warmer space sleeping, whether it's calming music in the background, it's relaxing touch, the list goes on, and we can get into some of those details that I did. And that's what I explained in the course, of course. But as I took those steps, I applied the steps to her as well, very intentionally bringing her along for the ride. And as I healed, I watched her heal too. And it was remarkable. It was day by day, I could see a difference. Week by week, I saw a huge difference. Within a couple of months, Maya was a different dog. All her hair was growing back. She was starting to gain weight, thrive. Her eyes were shining again. She was much, much happier and quieter and more content. And I too was healing. Our relationship was healing. And I know that being that we did it together made it just that much more powerful and fast and impactful.
That is such an amazing story. And I love it because I work with clients on a regular basis that their pet is very out of balance and they only know to go to the vet. My dog is sick and I need to go to the vet. And the vet is there for a lot of things, but there's certain things that we can take and help them that the vet just can't. And so many times they come in and they're saying, I've started these pills, I've started these shots, it helped her for about 2 weeks and now we're back at it again. And I don't know what to do. My husband is saying, do something. We can't sleep. The dog's on the bed, scratching. And to me, this story is so empowering because it helps us understand that we can have the ability, if we can look within and also realize as you're looking at your dog could be a mirror of what's going on with you. And so because of that, you can stop and say, okay, how can I change some of the ways I'm thinking, acting, behaving, doing, and then therefore helping their pets.
Yeah. I think for anyone that's feeling frustrated or like they've, quote unquote, tried everything, try this. Just give it a shot. Just give it a shot, just as much as you would a new food or, some new protocol. Just give it a shot. The best that can happen is that everybody heals. The worst that can happen is that you bring in healing principles and tools into your life that you maybe weren't aware of before, and you get some insight, and so does your animal. It's only a win-win, and so give it a shot and see what happens, and watch your animal be so in tune to you. I mean, just the commitment of like, let's do this together, right?
Exactly.
There? Yeah, you're like on the road to health already.
Yes. Well, it's interesting because we get busy in our lives and we forget that this animal has energy. It has a life force. And you talk about that even in your course. I love that you talk about prana. And I actually wanted you to maybe talk a little bit more about that and how that relates to our dog's health. if you could.
Sure. Yeah. So prana is another Sanskrit word that most of us, or at least many of us, are a little more familiar with because of yoga's popularity. It's brought some of these words that are a little bit more part of our language, like namaste, even meditation, or shavasana, everyone's favorite yoga pose, the resting pose. So some of us are a little more familiar with these words.
Sure.
Prana is a Sanskrit word that's our life force energy. And I think a good way to see or to understand prana is every time I get a bouquet of flowers, I think about this, is you put that bouquet of flowers fresh from your florist, you put it on the table and it's bright and colorful and full of life. And then as the days and a couple of weeks go by, you see it lessening. And of course, these have been cut off from their life source as a cut flower. And so so they hold the prana at first. That's what you see, that life force being so present in them. And then as the days and weeks go on, you see that prana slowly leave their existence until 3 weeks later or something, they're completely wilted, dried out, and dead. And so that is what prana is right there, that life force energy that creates life, that animates us. And it varies. Again, within ourselves, we know when we're feeling high on life, when we have strong prana, when we know our body is healing itself and doing the work it's made to do. And then we also know when we don't have high prana and we are lacking that energy. It's certainly, obviously, we're still living, breathing creatures, but that prana varies. And so recognizing that in our animals as well, we see that in the sparkle in their eyes, their playfulness, their contentment, their reactivity. I often will notice, we board dogs here also, and I will notice as a new dog comes in, it's fascinating to watch the cycles of their change, but they are new, they're a little bit nervous. I can tell when they're caught off guard how they react. That's how their inner state is. They get all freaked out really quickly and jump up and bark. They're not very solid. They're not stable and grounded at that moment. But if they hear a noise and they just put their head up and they're looking and maybe they bark a little, but they're just alert while connected, you can really feel the difference. And so it's interesting to just watch different animals coming in and out, as I'm sure you do with your store too, of just seeing, so many different examples before our eyes of the, in this case, prana, showing up, being, having a lack of, and everything in between. So that's kind of one of the primary principles that we work with Ayurveda, is building the prana, building the life force energy so that the body mind can thrive.
Exactly. Because that life force, I love the bouquet example. That's such a great example. But the life force is what heals us. There's certain things that we can do, herbs, homeopathy, massage, all of that. But if our life force is off, again, it's not going to do any good. So yes, one of the things, I can't remember his name, that you had a guest on. He was, I think, a doctor. He had said something that I found to be so true and so cool, because it helps you remember, our dogs have certain things and tendencies. And when they show you something that they like, how can you continue to do more of that for them? Yes. And that will help them become happier and make their life force even stronger.
Yes. And it's the little things. You're absolutely right. That's Dr. Suhas, one of the greatest Ayurvedic physicians in the world right now.
Oh.
He is a good friend and was willing to come on and talk about dogs, which was really cool. I learned so much from him. But yeah, I see it every day, and I think all of us do that a little, but why not tune in a bit more? We had a boarding dog last week who I always ask them to bring their bed with them, because dogs just need a little place to land and call their own. So this lovely golden retriever came along with her bed, and the bed being here in the living room, my young dog, I have a puppy named Poppy, who's 10 months old. She just loved that bed. She kept going over to it. She kept preferring it. The other dog would need to come in and be like, hey, that's my spot,
Exactly.
and Poppy's, I'd move Poppy. And so, so I could have just ignored that or said, oh, cute. But I thought, Poppy doesn't really love her current bed. She sleeps in it, but she's not like that. So I scoured the internet and I found that bed. And I just got it the other day. My same bed. I looked at the label and everything, right?
Sure.
Got that exact same bed. She immediately laid on it, rolled around in it. She won't get off the bed for like a day. She just stays there. So it's like these little things. It's like that fuzzy bed. It was like this oval, certain shape. She just loved that energy and that connection and how that made her feel. So that builds her life force, that boosts her immune system, that helps the relationship between us, because she sees like, thanks, Ma.
Exactly. You noticed.
Yes. Yes.
Can you have the golden retriever leave the bed, please? That's awesome.
Yeah. So they do pick up on these things, you know,
of course.
Way, or whether they like chicken or beef or turkey more, or where they're petted. You know, our puppy doesn't love being petted on the head. You know, every dog's different. And my husband's always like, she just doesn't like it when I pet her head. So my answer is like, then don't. Just don't pet her head.
Yeah.
He loves her chest petted. So just
there you go.
Chest, you know, pet her neck and her chest. That's where she really feels comfortable. And so it's just those kinds of things too, like tuning into what works for them and giving them respect, you know, really honoring and cherishing what the communication and the relationship that we have and all that's exchanged between that.
That's such a good point. I think, you know, we think about conventional dog training is very, you know, you sit, you do this, you know, and of course there's so much value to giving them kind of that language of what you're looking for. But at the same time, what many times we're doing is we're suppressing their emotions, you know, by forcing them to do something. And so then they may not feel like they can even speak freely, I guess, you know, because if I do, I'm going to get in trouble, or it's wrong for me to. And again, you know, of course, there's so many different scenarios, but I just think about one of the things that comes to my mind is a dog who, you know, might be having maybe some anxiety about you know, maybe there's some distance, maybe they're in another room and they want to be close to you or whatever. And when we just continue to yell, stop, 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 we're telling them that that's wrong. You know, it's wrong to feel that way. And one of the things that, you know, I've worked with a trainer, and one of the things he encourages is, because that's suppressing their energy or their, you know, emotion, instead look for opportunities when they stop barking and reward that, and, you know, let them know it's going to be okay, you know, and then slowly they'll start to realize you're going to come back, you know, but it's, you know, again, it's like listening to them, like what you were saying, you know, the bed, you know, you listen to what Poppy wanted and you know, provided it. I love it.
Yeah. Even though they don't speak, obviously they can't speak language and the words in the ways that we can, but they are speaking.
If we
can listen to them, if we can learn to listen to them, all of us know how good it feels to be heard.
Yes,
and
exactly.
How not good it feels to not be heard.
That's right.
You know, you're sitting with that person in your life that you're just like, wow, I'm like, we're like two different trains here, you know,
right?
Just can't seem to connect. And I feel like that's how our dogs might feel about us sometimes.
Right.
Those training videos or ones I see on Insta and stuff, they're really good from some of the trainers of like, here's this dog sitting here. And like you go and you kiss it on the face.
Yes.
And you give it a hug. And then you touch its little cheeks. These are all things that I love to do to dogs.
Sure.
But the point of these videos sometimes is like, watch their reactions. They don't turn and bite you. You know, I mean, some dogs,
of course,
does react in that way. But a lot of our dogs, they just put up with it. They're used to, they've been doing it for years. But if you actually look at them, if you say, wait, I'm not going to think about only what I want right now. I'm going to try to tune into what they want right now. And
absolutely
just perceive that, we are able to pick up on something very different than what we might have thought they were saying. And and just imagine from there, put yourself in their paws, you know?
That's
right. Imagine like for the first time, like, wow, Mom just listened to me. She saw that I didn't want to be hugged and squished and snuggled at that moment. And she gave me space.
Yeah.
Instead, gave me a snack.
That's right.
I feel so validated, you know?
Yeah.
Might not have the cognitive process to articulate this in the way that we would, but the emotional process is absolutely there. And they know the source of those feelings. It's all coming from us. Absolutely. And that's why it's so important. You know, that communication, that relationship is everything.
Absolutely. Well, I want to remind our listeners that today this is Pets Who Thrive Radio, and we are here with Amanda Ree from Sama Dog. And we're so glad you're joining us today. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about that's so fascinating to me is doshas. And if you could touch on what those are and just kind of why those are important, just explain a little bit about those.
Yeah, great. It's a important topic of Ayurveda. For anyone that's ever heard of it or studied it, you might be familiar, but there's these principles of the doshas, Dosha. That is another Sanskrit word that means mind-body type or mind-body personality. And the mind-body part is the most important piece of that, because it's not just how our physical being is acting and reacting and feeling, but it's also the mental state and how there's tendencies that fall into three categories for Ayurveda. And of course, there's many different kind of personality assessments out there in this world. And you could kind of see that in alignment with this, but again, bringing in the body and the mind as we categorize. So there are three doshas, and they are made up of the 5 elements. Ayurveda brings in one more than your kind of typical 4-element kind of configuration. Ayurveda brings in the other element of space. So it's space, air, fire, water, and earth. Those are the 5 elements. And so what happens with the doshas, these 3, again, mind-body types, is they bring together the elements in different ways that create that constitution in us. So let's be a little bit more clear. What are they? It's Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, more Sanskrit words. But Vata is a representation of, let's just keep it simple for this initial conversation. Obviously, I get into these details much more in my course, but to keep it simple, Vata is the principle of wind. And so when we see that in a being, you see that what I refer to with Maya, that's a good example of Vata. And so it's important to recognize that each of us have this mind-body type. We have like a predominant one. It's also important to remember that we all have all 3. So we have one that's predominant and pretty obvious, but we all have a mixture of all 3, and finding which is natural in us. And therefore, we make our choices, whether it's food, whether it's environment, whether it's touch, whether it's sounds, whether it's colors. Everything can be chosen through these principles that reside around that mind-body type. And why you make those choices, I don't want this to get too complicated. Why you make those choices is because it brings balance. So simply said, there are predisposed qualities that we have a tendency to get out of balance with. And then how do we bring it back into balance? That is what Ayurveda is teaching us to do. So in the case of Vata, V-A-T-A, Vata, if the predominant element is air, what does that look like? Well, it's airy, it's ungrounded, it's inconsistent, it's dry, it's light, it's constantly moving. Think of the principles of actual air. And you could see that in Maya. That constant movement, that ungroundedness, that nothing was settled, because the air is not settled. It's always moving. So what do you do for someone that has a lot of Vata? You help bring them back down to earth. And that's what we did through those principles that helped us. So Vata is one of them. The second one is Pitta, P-I-T-T-A. Again, these are all Sanskrit words. Pitta is the embodiment of fire, and that transformative, constantly changing, energizing, light, determination, power, all of that is behind fire. And so when we have that fire element in us, we might see, Pitta people, animals, they're strong leaders, they have a strong voice, they are workers, they have a lot of energy. But you can see how that when fire gets out of balance in something, it can become really overly hot and therefore burn beings, people, things around them, or the internal world. So when we have too much fire, we have a lot of inflammation in our body. So that's when our digestion, our animal's digestion, will be off. You can see even like acid reflux. It's almost like that firiness is like coming up. Indigestion, you've got all that. It's like kind of boiling up inside of you. You have fiery skin issues that are really hot and moist, like fiery. Then that is a Pitta imbalance. Or behaviorally, an animal that's very intense, edgy, can get aggressive. Those are all fiery reactions. So what do? In the case of the airiness, we ground it. In the case of the fieriness, what do? Well, we cool it. We calm the intensity of the fire. And so there's lots of things that we can do through food, through environment, through sound. Remember, all the senses come in and help us to cool the fire. And then the last of the three doshas is kapha, Kapha, kapha. And that principal element is earth. So these are the beings that have a lot of solidity to their body. So they can be heavier, they can be slower, they can be, when out of balance, because that's kind of what we're pointing at here, is lazy and inert and gain weight and get sluggish, don't want to go for walks. The metabolism, the digestive system, everything's moving very slowly. They just don't want to get out of bed in the morning. They get withdrawn. We all know we've had these times in our own life. So that's when earth has taken over, and the earth has made us too heavy. It's like moving mountains to get through the day. And I think we all can relate in some way to all of these, right?
Absolutely.
Like I said, we all have all of them. So when someone, animal, humans are animals, but when a being has too much earthiness, too much heaviness, what do we want to do? We want to add lightness. So we, again, add that through all their food, their environment, everything that their senses take in can be more light, a little bit dry, uplifting, a little more energizing and mobilizing. So now things get moving again. So you're working with nature's principles, as complicated as it can sometimes sound. It's actually very intuitive when you get into it. The languaging sometimes makes it a little more complicated than I think it needs to be. That's why I include that, because it's very important to this timeless practice. But at the same time, it's not really that important, because it's the principles that we're looking at here. Is this being ungrounded and nervous and edgy and unstable? Or are they fired up? Are they edgy? Are they irritable? Or are they slow, a little depressed, a bit too much inertia going on? And so when we can interpret these things with our own eyes, with our awareness, we can then make the choices. Or we can use that Dog Dosha quiz that I have on my website. Anybody can go there anytime and take, it's 12 questions or whatnot. And then that gives you an assessment of where your animal is right now, and follows up with different resources, different practices, different tools, different foods that you can bring into their life to bring more balance.
Yes. And thank you for explaining that. And I will just also say that I love the Dog Dosha quiz, because it really, like you said, all of them have certain elements of each one of those, but it really does highlight where their tendency is and where you can start with trying to get them more balanced. And just for the listeners too, you go into so much more detail in your course about each one of those things and some of the foods and suggestions, even some different meditations you can do, and, for each one to help them balance. So I do encourage listeners to look into that course. It was so eye-opening for me. Yeah. So
great.
So that is interesting when you think of doshas and how, it is very much like almost like a personality test. And I think about constitution too, because I deal with homeopathy a lot. And so we work with dogs and what their constitution is and try to help with balancing that out. And constitution to me just means, what are their tendencies? And that's kind of what this is highlighting as well. So it's very much in the same realm. Yeah.
We have our natural tendencies that we're born with. Here's a little more Sanskrit for us. That's called your prakriti. Your natural makeup, your natural recipe. And then life happens and can get off balance. And that's your vikruti. And so that really is what we're assessing in Ayurveda, is the vikruti, like what's going on right now. Is there too much air? Is there too much fire? Or is there too much earth? Simply said, with what's happening right now, whether it's physically, emotionally, behaviorally, circumstantially. That will help guide us back to, again, that sama, that balance point. And it's different for everybody. And it's different at different times of our life. It's different at different times of the year. We can see where clearly Pitta, fire, is more prevalent in the summertime than it is in the wintertime. Where Vata, air, wind, is more prevalent in the fall than it is in the winter. And so work with the elements. That's why it's the science of nature, because it's all about using those elements that make up all of us to allow nature's way, the beautiful innate ability of this body to heal. That's really all we're doing, is we're giving it what it needs in order for it to do the healing itself. So it's very empowering, actually. You said earlier, we turn our, when we see something's wrong with our animals, we immediately just, we need to go to the vet. And I do it too, even as much as I've learned over all these years and how much knowledge I have, I still see something out of balance and think, maybe we need to go to the vet. So it's very common. It is that next step that we've all been taught, because we aren't animal doctors.
Right.
Well, we don't need to be animal doctors to know how to help our animals, just like we don't need to be human doctors to know how to help ourselves. So we can empower. This work, not just Ayurveda, but all of the natural sciences, understanding that empowers you to be an incredibly capable and well-resourced pet parent. Because we have so much more ability to help them heal than we realize. And we might be the reason they're not in balance. They're not in sama. Not to blame, but simply to look at it like I did with Maya and realize the power that we have to help them. So it's like, nature will work itself out. Like nature will heal itself. Look at the environment around us. Look at how everything takes care of itself really well. Our humanness gets in here and kind of messes things up. So these principles, these philosophies come back and help us to know how to realign to what's naturally healing and good for all of us.
Right. It's kind of like a orchestra and one of the instruments is out of tune, and it's like, you gotta, just kind of look where we can spend that time to try to create that balance and use nature to do that. So I love one of the things that you shared earlier, and that was about the animal's innate ability to be in touch with us, and about like service dogs. If you could share that with the listeners.
Yeah, we were mentioning that earlier, that we were saying how many times the circumstances, the conditions going on with the animal has some reflection of what's going on with the human. And we were saying how it's even more than we realize. And I think it's important for us to to give an example of that, to look at service animals, that are trained to detect our blood chemistry, to detect the sugar in our blood flow, to detect the hormone levels within our body, to detect our respiration rate at the most subtle level that we don't even detect yet, to know that in 5 minutes from now, we're going to have a panic attack. Like,
yes, it's
animals
amazing.
can do and do every day for people all over the world. They save lives every day, knowing and being able to perceive this information. So of course they're doing that all the time. It's not like only service dogs do that because they've been trained for it. Yes, they probably do it better than your average dog because they do have that training. They know what they're looking for. They know how to react. But that doesn't mean that our average pet is not picking up on all those same things. They're making their own interpretations of it, but they're picking up on the smells, the sounds, the subtleties. They're doing more research on dogs now than ever. In the last 3 years, more scientific studies have happened with canines than in the last 30 years. So it's really cool. And one of them that I recently did some studying and looking into was the facial expressions and just the slightest movement of our eyebrows, just our eyebrows, and how much that means to our animals. We don't even notice these things, the curl of our mouth, the tilt of our head, the arms up in frustration, all of this, not to mention what they're smelling and interpreting. They're smelling our breath. They're smelling the chemistry. Like we said, they're smelling the sweat on our body or not. They're so in tune with all of their senses that they're like a radio antenna that's picking up lots and lots of information. So actually, if you even want to go deeper, not only can we help them to be their most balanced because of what we're putting out, but we can utilize that capability of theirs to know when we are also out of balance. Our dogs can be our therapists. And many we all know that. Anybody who loves their dog knows exactly what I mean by that. But in an even deeper way of being able to show us things that we can't perceive about ourselves. So I'll notice that I have a big Bernedoodle that's like my heart dog I'm so close to. And my computer faces out, kind of the living room is right behind my computer. So I'll be on a call or in a meeting and I'll just see her like once in a while, her head, she's sleeping over there on the couch, but then once in a while her head shoots up and she stares at me. And I'll just see that movement. And I've now learned to tune in. It's always the part of the meeting where I got really intense or I got defensive or I was just given some big workload that I didn't want to do or whatever it is.
Right.
I'm just like, oh, I had a reaction. I'm keeping the straight face because I'm on Zoom, trying to be the professional. But Violet's over there like, oh, are you okay, Mom?
Right.
I felt that on the phone. And like it's incredible the way she tunes into me like that. I don't know what it was. Is it my tone of voice? Is it my breath? My heart rate? What is it that she just tuned into? I don't know. Maybe a little bit of all of that, but that's to show why they are so perceptive, receptive, and why this communication unspoken between them can be more powerful than the relationships where we do speak between us. This is the truth. This is the root. And that's why I think many of our listeners love animals the way that we do, so deep in our hearts that if we think about it a lot, we'll cry because it's just like that love is so rich. And that's because we are operating on a deeper communication plane than we are with most of the other beings in our life.
Of course. That's so amazing. I love too that you are aware enough that you notice her reaction. So it kind of helps you go, what did I just do? So that's really insightful too. What are some of the things that you would like? Because I know we're kind of closing up here. What are some of the things that you would really like to leave the listeners with today?
Yeah, I think we've touched on so many good things. I think most importantly, what we just spoke about was how powerful, how much of an impact that we not only our day-to-day has on our animals, but the more we learn, and we don't need to go to veterinary school for all of that learning. It's a different set of learning. But the more we learn, the more we're able to help them. And the more capable, the more knowledgeable, the more confident that we feel with applying those healing principles because we understand our animals, we understand the way these things work. And so I think just recognizing we don't need to turn our power over. We get to hold and even improve that capability for ourselves. And it will only help us. It'll help our children. It'll help our spouses. It'll help our animals. It'll help our neighbors.
Right. That's so good.
It's a huge ripple effect when we start to tune in this way. So I think that's a very important
piece. It's so important. You're right, though. How we show up it makes such an impact on everything around us. So yeah, that's amazing.
Everything around us. Yeah. So I think that's great. And then just, remembering that I have lots of tools. If this has sparked interest in anyone listening, there's a ton of tools. Just go to the samadog.com website, Samadog. And there's all kinds of everything from tons of articles to meditations. I have tons of different meditations, themed and unthemed on YouTube. We have the Dog Dosha quiz that can give you more information, of course, about that mind-body type and decisions to make from there. So just know that there's a ton of resources out there. And I am here for all of our listeners as well, if anyone has any questions along the way.
Absolutely. Well, Amanda, I cannot thank you enough for sharing your wonderful wisdom today with the listeners. And I do encourage people to go to your website. There's so many valuable tools and information there. And I think it's just going to help people, again, learn so much more about how to connect with their animals. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for the beautiful work you're doing as well, Tammy. It's been great to be here with everyone.
Thank you. All right.
Namaste.
Yes. Namaste.
Pets Who Thrive Radio with Tammy King.